One consequence that is already occurring is the loss of sea ice. The lowest aerial extent of sea ice occurred in 2012. The yellow line shows the average minimum extent from 1981 to 2010, whereas the ice extent of the ice is for 2012. This shows the maximum aerial extent of sea ice in 2019. The plot to the right shows seasonal variations in sea ice over different years. Each line represents a different year, and darker blues indicate more recent years. The pink is 2019. Note that sea ice extent is getting smaller and smaller every year. Esri has used data from the National Snow and Ice Data Center to prepare a story map on sea ice. This activity gives you the opportunity to explore sea ice and data about sea ice. Give it a try. Sea ice is disappearing, and on land, permafrost is melting. Permafrost is permanently frozen ground, and approximately 50% of Canada's land is underlain by permafrost. The thickness of permafrost ranges from a few meters to hundreds of meters. The spatial extent of permafrost varies from north to south. In the far north, it is a continuous layer. But as you move south, it becomes discontinuous and eventually sporadic. In the north, permafrost can be thought of as glue, the glue that holds the land together. Warming temperatures are causing permafrost to melt, which is really what we're saying is that the glue is melting. This is leading to incredible landscape changes due to mega slumps such as these pictured here. Thawing permafrost is also leading to problems with infrastructure. As it melts, the overlying earth becomes unstable. This can lead to road damage, as shown here, and damage to buildings. Much of Canada's north is comprised of peatlands, which, as we learned in Lecture 5, are an important part of the carbon cycle. Peatlands store carbon. Peatlands can be underlain by permafrost, and melting of this permafrost can affect peatlands and lead to the loss of carbon storage. This activity takes you on a tour of Canada's peatlands. There are questions for you to answer as you take the tour. The north is also characterized by thousands of lakes and ponds. Some are very large, like Great Bear Lake and Great Slave Lake, but many are much smaller. All are being altered by climate change. Many lakes and ponds are underlain by permafrost. In the far north, permafrost is continuous, but as you move south, it becomes isolated and sporadic. As permafrost melts, drainage changes, causing some lakes to disappear, and in other areas, lakes will form. Important to understanding the global hydrologic balance and how it is changing is knowing how much water is stored on land. This is a study from Siberia, but similar research is also being carried out in Canada. This study was done using satellite data. The red dots on this map show lakes that have disappeared. This is a satellite image of some part of the map from the previous slide. In 1973, there were many lakes that have since disappeared. This is caused when permafrost melts. Sometimes melting permafrost leads, like we saw earlier, to slumping and lakes drain rapidly. Here's a picture of what the landscape looks like when a lake has drained. In the high Arctic, north of 70 degrees, permafrost is still intact, but lakes are disappearing for other reasons. When I was an undergraduate student like you, I was incredibly lucky and got a job working as a field assistant for the Geological Survey of Canada. In the summer of my third year, I traveled to Cape Herschel on Ellesmere Island, shown by the red star on this map. Part of my job was to help a PhD student at the time, Marianne Douglas, sample lakes and ponds for diatoms. On the left is a picture of one of the lakes we sampled in 1987. In 2006, that pond was gone. Sediment records revealed that the pond had persisted for more than 7,000 years, and now, in a blink of an eye, it was abruptly gone. Here is another example of a pond gone. Interestingly, precipitation in this area has likely not changed much, and predictions for the future suggest, if anything, it might increase a little. So why are these ponds disappearing? John Small and Marianne Douglas speculated that it is warming temperatures causing increased evaporation that is leading to these ponds that have been here for thousands of years to disappear. Warming temperatures are also affecting wildlife in the Arctic. Because food webs connect wildlife, we can consider changes that begin at the bottom of the food chain and go up to the top, or those that begin at the top and move down. Let's consider an example of each. Let's go back to lakes. One of the most profound changes to Arctic lakes is the reduction of ice cover. In the past, lakes like this one on Ellesmere Island could have been frozen all year round. Now, they can either open up along the edges or become completely ice-free in the summer. This change is creating new habitat for aquatic organisms and also increasing the length of the growing season. Diatoms are a type of protist found in almost every aquatic environment worldwide. They are microscopic photosynthetic organisms at the bottom of the food chain. Diatoms have a cell wall composed of opaline silica. Sediments taken from Arctic lakes reveal something very interesting. Prior to the 20th century, there were no diatoms at all, or if there were diatoms living in these ponds, they were sparse and mainly from the genus Fragillaria. These small Fragillaria diatoms live in the sediment. After the 20th century, there was an explosion of the types of diatoms in these lakes and ponds, as shown here. The new diatoms lived on mosses, plants, and the open water. For 7,000 years, the diatoms living in the ponds were the same year after year, and suddenly they abruptly changed. Take a close look at these diatom stratigraphies that show the changes in diatom community composition. Make sure you're able to interpret these plots and understand the data represented here. The stratigraphies reveal that the changes in diatoms occurred very recently and at the same time that rapid warming began in the north. Warmer temperatures have led to increased habitats and diversity of diatom species. The increase in diatom production and diversity observed has also led to changes in other aquatic organisms up the food chain. Changes are also occurring from the top down. Polar bears are at the top of the Arctic food chain, and much research is ongoing regarding their changing diets. This is a study from Norway. Here, scientists have observed an increase in the time that polar bears are in nesting areas. This study found a single bear could consume 200 eggs in 2 hours. This plot shows changes in the number of days bears were in nesting areas at 3 different sites between 1975 and 2015. Clearly, bears are spending more time in these areas, which is affecting the duck populations, a top-down effect. But why are bears spending more time at these sites? Scientists speculate that the disappearance of sea ice, where bears normally hunt for seals, is forcing bears to move inland in search of food. In the last lecture, we will hear a different view about polar bears. Last, I want to talk about caribou and another important source of information about climate change, traditional knowledge. A couple of years ago, I was at a workshop in Yellowknife and I saw a presentation that really moved me. A young research and expert, Peter Jacobson, had moved to a Dene community to help them. Watch the video on the next slide for an introduction to the caribou problem.